Hi, I think we'll get started. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Angela Dumberwicki. I'm the Vice President of the Manitowish Waters Lakes Association. And, I really am very happy to see you here at this informational meeting about Eurasian watermilfoil. And in the end of the meeting, or by the end of the meeting, we hope that you learn what is Eurasian watermilfoil, why it's a problem, where it is on our chain of lakes, what's been done so far to control its spread, and what's planned for the future, especially for 2025, and then what you can do to help and how you can get involved. Let me take care of a few housekeeping things before I introduce the speakers. We're not going to take a formal break tonight, so we can keep moving along. If you need to get up and stretch, help yourself to the cookies, brownies, and don't be afraid to open the top. And water or whatever, you can just get up and the restrooms are out that way if you need to use the restroom. We will allow time for questions after each speaker if we do have enough time, but I will be keeping time, so we're gonna keep moving along. If we don't have time after an individual speaker, we will allow time, assuming we have time, at the end of the meeting, and some of us will be here after the meeting, and you can ask questions at that time. So without further ado, if there's no immediate questions or concerns, anybody have any? Then I'm going to introduce the speakers. I'm going to introduce them once so we don't have to keep stopping after each presentation. First, there's Greg Holt, who is the president of the Manitowish Waters Lakes Association. Many of you probably know Greg. He has been heavily involved with this effort to Eurasian watermilfoil. He's been involved in many meetings, presentations, and so on. So we're very glad that he was able to come tonight to speak to you. Then we have Jamie Van, who is the Woods and Waters Director of the North Lakeland Discovery Center. Jamie provides invaluable technical assistance to us about this horrendous invasive species and many others, not just this one. And then we have Todd Hank from Onterra. He'll be on the Zoom or whatever you want to call it. He'll be here electronically. He's from Onterra, and Onterra provides technical assistance in identifying and mapping Eurasian watermilfoil and other invasive species for the Lakes Association and other groups. And then we have Laurel Scholwall. Where are you, Laurel? Yeah. Laurel is with this the Lions Club Save the Chain Committee, and she will talk to us about specific efforts with that committee for fundraising to help with the control of this Eurasian watermilfoil. So without further ado, Greg.
Thank you, Angie. I think I'm just told to stand here, so I'll stand here. In a few minutes, we're going to hear a whole lot of information about Eurasian watermilfoil, some of the ways of attempting to control it, some of the things that we're looking to be doing in 2025. But before we get into that, I'm going to just give a little basic information on where it was in 2023 and 2024, something to do with the spread that we saw in 2024. And that'll give us a little idea of what we're looking at in 2025. One of the things to think about before we actually talk about where it is in Manitowish waters, it's good to know that we aren't alone in this. There's Eurasian watermilfoil all around us. The DNR tells us it's been in the state of Wisconsin, in the southern half of the state, since the 1960s, and more recently in the northern part of the state. The first time it was found in Vilas County was over by Eagle River in the 1990s. Since then, it has popped up in lots of places. And if you've been reading the newspaper or seeing reports, there's Eurasian watermilfoil in some of the lakes of the communities of Lake Tomahawk, Eagle River, Boulder Junction, Land O'Lakes, Mercer, Lac du Flambeau, all around us. And we thought we were doing pretty good because we didn't have any. At least that's what we thought in 2023. That changed. On July 15th, some folks were enjoying themselves out on the water. They were paddling in the Alder Lake area and the Trout River area. And we were very fortunate that one of those persons who was out there paddling was very experienced in aquatic invasive species. In fact, she's the coordinator for the Oneida County Aquatic Invasive Species Program. And she saw a couple things that concerned her. And she saw a segment of a plant floating in Alder Lake and then some rooted plants in the Trout River. And that kicked off a whole bunch of stuff. She relayed that information, and that was on a Saturday afternoon. The beginning and the middle of the next week, there were conversations going on between the Discovery Center staff, Lakes Association, and Vilas County Land and Water Conservation Department. So the first thing that had to be found out was, is there a bunch there? Is that indeed what she saw indicative of a problem? So you have to have some idea what's going on. So the first thing that happened was some surveying had to be done. Oh, do you have the little clicker, or are you gonna?
I'll advance.
Okay, so some surveying had to be done. So let's turn off a couple lights maybe. Jamie, you want to get those? Now,
Okay, fair enough. Don't sleep on us.
all right. So where they started the survey was upstream from where the plants had been seen on that Saturday. And they started, and I'm gonna walk over here to the map. Over here, they put in at the Wild Rice Boat Landing and continued along the shore of Wild Rice and down the Trout River. And that was the DNR and Vilas County Land and Water Conservation Department. And the good news is they didn't see anything. They didn't find anything. Subsequent surveys picked up where they left off, and that was the Discovery Center. And they continued and they went into Alder Lake, did all of Alder Lake, and then they went into the Trout River between Alder Lake and Manitowish Lake. Thank you. Nothing in Alder, but this is what they found in the Trout River. And you can see some three ferny type looking things there. Those are representatives of Eurasian Watermilfoil. Those were 3 small colonies that were found. And those dots were 27 individual plants that were found. They continued surveying, James, and they went into the Manitowish River. Now, this was not a full survey of all of the Lake of they went into Lake Manitowish. This was not a survey of all of Manitowish Lake, but this was a targeted survey. There's like a early detection protocol that they use to try and figure out some spots to monitor and see if they have an idea where it might be. And you can see 5 circles around there. There's 2 white circles at the top, and then there's 3 kind of orangish red circles at the bottom. Those were the 5 areas they decided to target and look. They found nothing at those 2 white circles, number 1 and 5, but they did detect Eurasian Watermilfoil on those 3 spots by the southern shore of Manitowish Lake. So that's where we were in 23. Eurasian Watermilfoil in the Trout River, Eurasian Watermilfoil in Manitowish Lake. Before we get to 2024, it's good to kind of review what the winter was like between 23 and 24. Those folks who are up here may remember it was the winter that almost wasn't a winter. There was ice on the lakes, but it was thin ice. We had very little snow, so more sun's penetrating through, and it was a very early ice off. And I've been told that that's great conditions for many types of aquatic plants, and apparently those are great conditions also for Eurasian Watermilfoil. So in 2024, the surveys started up and the entire chain was surveyed. All the waters in the chain were surveyed in 2024. This is a representation. You can see on the left, there's Manitowish Lake and the Trout River leading into it. This looks a little different than the other slides. This slide was prepared by Onterra, and all these different colors and shapes mean something. So all those spots that have colors and shapes, and I'll talk about them quickly here or in a second, they all are evidence of where Eurasian Watermilfoil was found in the Trout River. The small kind of light, it looks on here like light green circles, those are where individual plants were found. The yellow circles are where there were clumps of plants found, and those 2 orange circles kind of in that big bay on the left, those were where colonies of Eurasian Watermilfoil were found. Now the amoeba-shaped polygons in those areas are areas where there wasn't just 1 or 2 plants, but there was a bunch of plants scattered in an area. So they use a different type of way of showing that. The lightest color gray means it was highly scattered. There were plants in there, but they were scattered throughout. The next color, which kind of looks like on this, a dark green, means they were still scattered, but there were more there than the highly scattered. The yellow one polygon in the middle, I think you can, I will try and point to that. I'll goof myself up if I'm using this thing. The yellow polygon in the middle there was where they were dominant in the area. They were scattered in the area, but they were the dominant plant that was found in that region. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, Manitowish Lake, you can see the Trout River coming in on the bottom right there. And all those spots and circles in Manitowish Lake were areas where Eurasian watermilfoil was found. It was also found, I'm going to try it once to, okay, if you see down at the bottom, there are some spots here, there's some spots here and here. So it was found in a few places along the shore, but for sure the predominant amount in Manitowish Lake was found down around that area that's kind of by Chippewa Retreat Resort area. So that's what we had with surveys in 2024 in the Trout River and Manitowish Lake. I'm going to get to some other slides in a second here, but there's a bunch of lakes we don't have any slides for. And that's good news because there are a bunch of lakes that were surveyed at no time in 2024 were any plants detected. And if I can do this by memory, that includes Rest Lake, Island Lake, Clear Lake, Wild Rice, Boulder, and the 3 lakes below the dam, Vance, Benson, and Sturgeon. So there were no Eurasian watermilfoil plants found in those lakes. If we go to the next slide, Little Star. Little Star had some plants found. And they're very, very interesting to me that, you know, there was a plum found way over on the bottom left, and there was a plum found over in the top right. Those 2 areas were duly recorded and marked because it's good to know when there's a new plant invasive in a lake. And the DNR needs that. It's helpful for grants and all the things they have to follow. But they weren't just duly noted and marked, they were removed. All right, next slide. Stone Lake and Fawn Lake and a little bit of the Manitowish River.
I got
it. You can see those orange circles. That's where there were
I got it.
found on the right edge of Stone Lake. There were some plants over in the river.
I got it if you want to watch it.
Starts to lead into the Manitowish River. And there's one that you can see up in the left-hand corner of the map. There was one found in the Manitowish River. All these plants, also after being duly recorded, were removed. Next slide, Jim, please. Oh, I didn't do it.
I had to mute somebody and I seemed to.
All right.
There we go. We're back.
Okay. Now we're back to a section, a map that you saw before, but this is 2024 now. You can see this is the upper Trout River between Alder Lake and Wild Rice Lake. And there were some clumps of plants there also noted and some individual plants. Those also were removed. And I think we have one more. And then we have Spider Lake. Spider Lake is kind of like these last lakes I've said. They don't have as many plants in them that as Manitowish or the Trout River, but they had more than the other lakes that had the plants removed. And you can see that there's quite a few plants in that southwest bay on that southern shore. Through a lot of diligent work by Jamie and her crew at the Discovery Center, they did a lot of hand pulling and they got most of that out. And then they were assisted by aquatic plant management, which is a concern out of Minocqua that we hire and contract. I say we in the global sense, the Discovery Center, the community, the Lakes Association, the community works at this. And they did a lot of work in the Trout River and Manitowish Lake over the summer. And they came in and they also did some hand pulling through snorkel work and removed 99%, if not all the plants down in the Spider Lake. So that's where we were in 2024 at the end. The takeaway is lots of plants in the Trout River that did not get removed, lots of plants in that bay in Manitowish Lake, and the other lakes either didn't have any or had a few plants that were removed. So that's my presentation as to what was there in 2023 and 2024. Does anyone have any questions about the relative, the lakes and where the plants were? Yeah,
So over here in the bay on Spider,
yeah.
they were not there in 23, but they were all there in 24.
In 2023, when 2023 started out, we did not think we had any plants at all. So the surveys that were done in 2023 for Eurasian Watermilfoil, for curly-leaf pondweed, and I will let Jamie later speak out the survey process, did not find any in 2023.
So that's all from 1 year.
All those plants were detected in
In
2024.
24.
That would be the better way
And
to
is there
say
any
it.
reason that particular bay has such a huge amount?
That's a great question, and this is where I defer. I will let Jamie answer that or Todd answer that. They'd be much, I could give you some information and 50% of it would be wrong. So let's not do that. Are there any other questions about where the plants are or what happened between 23 and 2024?
I got one other question.
Well, please.
How'd you feel about this winter then? Is this winter one that was, wasn't like last year, but it's close?
Okay.
Do we still think we're gonna have that problem?
I'd love to have a crystal ball. That's a great question. The ice was thicker this year.
Yep.
Snow, maybe a little more, but not a ton more. We kind of wanted to get a jump start on knowing the answer to that. Unfortunately, the lakes are still frozen. I did go over to the shore on Spider to see if I could get at that area in between with the water being drawn down, the area that was exposed, but it was snow right up to the.
Well, they're open now.
Okay.
Yeah, Stone and Fawn are certainly open.
Okay, well, great. I did go to Trout River, kind of over in the Aberdeen area, and kind of walked along in the shoreline a little bit and looked for plants. And I can tell you the plants that you find after getting snowed on and iced on and everything all winter long, they don't look as pretty as the other plants we see here. They're kind of monkey and stuff. But I was able to see in about 6 inches of water, a plant that after some more inspection I saw was Eurasian Watermilfoil. Now that's 6 inches of water. That's with the drawdown. That would be translate to about 4 feet of water in the normal season and stuff. So yeah, I think there's every reason to expect that there's going to be plants in 2025 in the areas we've seen them before. What it's going to be, that's why Jamie and her crew does early season surveys and gets out there and looks. Any other questions? If not, I will now defer to, I believe Todd is next on the agenda. Okay, if the magic of Zoom can work here. Jim will get Todd presenting. Todd's from Onterra, and he'll give us some information that will probably answer more questions than I ever could. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I do have a presentation to share screens here. I'm going to try to do that right now. Okay, so you can see this, great. Okay, so I'll get going. I have a number of slides to go through today, and hopefully y'all can learn a little bit about Eurasian Watermilfoil and some of the ways in which it's monitored and management perspectives and things of that nature. My name is Todd. I work for Onterra out of Pere, Wisconsin. I'm an aquatic ecologist, and we work on a lot of lakes around the state, helping groups manage invasive species and helping them create management plans and things of that nature. And today I prepared some slides just to kind of provide some kind of basic information about Eurasian Watermilfoil, biology and management perspectives and things of that nature. So we'll go through a little bit of information first about how Eurasian Watermilfoil reproduces and spreads. It does produce some seed, but that's really very low viability. The primary way that this species spreads is through fragmentation. That being a vegetative clone of the parent plant. So in terms of fragments, there's more than one kind. The first one is an autofragment. This is the process by which Eurasian Watermilfoil has evolved a way to spread itself around within lakes. It creates fragments on its own naturally. So in this photo, you can see These are called adventitious roots. These are little white strands hanging off of this fragment. Those are roots that are formed on this piece of the plant before it even detaches from the host plant. So this is one of the ways that it helps to spread itself by producing these fragments with their roots already in place. They have high energy storage in those roots. They're high viability. You know, they break off and float away once or twice a year typically. And you can see how a fragment like this, if it lands in some place conducive to its growth, somewhere that it likes, it has a good chance of taking root. Compare that to another type of fragment, an allo fragment. This would be a fragment that's caused by mechanical breakage, for example, by boating through a colony or by trying to hand harvest a plant, or just wind action and things like that. The difference between these two fragments is that the one that's being caused, the allo fragment, doesn't have these roots already hanging off of it. So it has less energy storage to make that voyage around the lake. It's lower viability than the auto fragments that are being purposely created. So what this means is that our ability to manage spread by trying to control fragments that we're making is overstated. Eurasian watermilfoil is great at making fragments on its own and spreading on its own. And as it gets established within lakes, there's really no reason to be concerned about making more fragments of your own doing, because this plant's already doing way better than we can do anyway at making fragments that are more viable. And I want to introduce one type of aquatic plant monitoring survey that kind of helps us look at some data I'm going to show next. So one way we monitor Eurasian watermilfoil is through a type of survey called a point intercept survey. And in this example on the picture here, these are all sampling locations in Lake Matunga over by Crandon. The type of survey has you visit each one of these sampling locations with a GPS guidance, and you lower a double-headed garden rake essentially into the lake, and you scoop up the plants and identify what's there. This is the DNR's protocol this is like the standard protocol, standard methods for assessing the aquatic plant population within a lake, not just Eurasian watermilfoil, but all species. What we use this data for is try to determine the littoral frequency of occurrence. That being, we can understand how deep plants grow in the lake by doing a survey like this. So in this example, as you get into these colored blue shapes in the center, those are all deeper than plants grow in this lake. These plants are growing out to about 25 feet. And what we use that information then is to understand the max depth of plants gives us kind of a number to understand the percentage of points that a certain species is at. So in this example, there were 704 monitoring sites, but only 470 of them were shallower than the maximum depth of plant growth, or the littoral zone. So that means 470 of these sampling locations are not too deep to hold plants. And in this example, 65 of these sites have a red dot, meaning Eurasian watermilfoil is present. And 65 out of 470 gives us a littoral frequency of occurrence of 13.8%. So this is very different than the mapping surveys that you saw some slides earlier. This is a quantitative one. And this kind of gives you an idea of how this number comes about for my next slide. What I'm showing now is some data from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, a long-term trends study that they conducted over the course of many years using that point intercept methodology. So on the bottom axis here, we've got years 2005 through 2022. Then on the left side of the axis here is our percentage from 0 to 100 in the Eurasian watermilfoil littoral frequency of occurrence. So in that last example I showed, we had 13.8%, I believe, occurrence. And what this data is showing is the occurrence of milfoil when they replicate that point intercept survey every year. This is showing what the population of Eurasian watermilfoil does in unmanaged lakes. So all of these examples are lakes that they're not doing active management. There's no herbicide treatments. There's no large scale efforts to control the plants. This is just showing you what the milfoil is doing all on its own, largely based on environmental factors. So these lakes on the different colors here, the first ones I'm showing are from central Wisconsin lakes. This blue line is Montana Lake now. And these bottom examples are from northern lakes and forests. So kind of northern Wisconsin, near the Manitowish chain. So this first example is showing you the littoral occurrence going from 30 to 45, back to 40 and 30 and up and down and up and down and up and down, right? I think a lot of people's perception and thought of what's going to happen is that it's going to start low and just increase and increase over time. But what these data show us is that it's highly variable from year to year with no management driving these populations. This example in Crystal Lake is kind of very flat overall from about 15 to 25% every year. Then you get an example of Crooked Lake where it was almost at zero for eight years before it started to tick up closer to 10%. Now we're at Bear Paw Lake. You see how quickly it increased from zero up to 25% in a few years, but then it declined all the way back below 5% a few years later and remained low. And again, there's no management driving this downward movement. That's just what it's doing on its own. So another example, you can see this one is very low for a long period of time before it increased up closer to 30% and starts kind of going up and down from there. And as you're going through these, you can just see the variability in these populations. They don't just go up and up forever. They go up, they go down, they go up, they go down, they're flat, they're all over the place. These are driven by environmental factors like having no winter last winter, or having other environmental factors like water level changes, or just any number of things that we don't pinpoint one thing alone. But this is just demonstrating that these populations will go up and down on their own in absence of management. In terms of management, there's a few perspectives I want to go through, kind of trains of thought in dealing with how do you manage this plant, right? It's an invasive species and it can cause problems in some lakes. Well, the first perspective is actually no active management, letting nature take its course. This is actually something that you'd be surprised how many lake groups choose to go this route after maybe they've had milfoil in their lake for 40 years now, some of these southern Wisconsin lakes, and they know, maybe it's never caused a problem, or it's only rarely caused problems in some cases. But in this perspective, you let nature take its course. You don't actively manage the plants. Typically, there's no organized, control efforts, probably some level of monitoring. The second perspective is to reduce the entire population on a lake-wide level, or doing population management. In this scenario, you're managing all of the plants, and you can do this in a couple of ways depending on the scale of the population you're talking about. What's important to note is that eradication is never a realistic outcome for a lake that has an established population. There's no tool in our toolbox to eradicate milfoil from your lake. I think if you had a few single plants and you're definitely sure that's all you have, maybe then I can see you eradicating those 3 plants from your lake. But when you have an established population, and I would argue that it's established in locations within Manitowish chain and the Trout River, there's nothing we can do to eradicate, right? So you're looking at management options at that point in time. When you do have an early population, maybe it is just a handful of plants, then you can target all plants with a manual removal strategy. But if you have a larger population, the only way to manage the entire population might be through an herbicide treatment that targets the whole lake or the entirety of the population that you're dealing with. And in those scenarios, many groups will set some sort of threshold that will indicate within their management planning process of when do we consider doing a whole lake kind of level manipulation. Sometimes they use data generated from that point intercept survey I showed an example of. For example, when they hit some level of occurrence, maybe that 15-20% plus, where they're like, okay, now this is starting to get bad, and this is where we want to do a management technique on a lake-wide level. There is sometimes regulatory pushback on sometimes trying to implement this strategy, especially if herbicides are being used. There's a lot more pushback in certain parts of the state on that particular option. The third perspective, this is probably the most commonly employed perspective in people and lake groups out there that are managing milfoil, is this nuisance control idea. This is minimizing navigation and recreation impediment. So when milfoil gets bad enough that it's impacting your ability to use the site, it's impacting your boating, your swimming, your use of that part of the lake. In that scenario, you might implement a nuisance control strategy with one or a number of different techniques. Hand harvesting can have a small scale ability to accomplish this goal, but oftentimes it's done with herbicides or mechanical harvesters, like a big weed cutter, for example. So these are kind of the three main perspectives that groups kind of consider when they're creating a management plan in terms of how to manage Eurasian water milfoil. The kind of buzzword at the department is integrated pest management. This is the idea that using several different combination of methods and tools in your toolbox is more effective when you apply it collectively as a part of a defined strategy, instead of just doing the same one thing over and over and over. So you kind of see on this different cogs in the wheel here, in the gears, some level of monitoring and planning kind of goes into understanding where you might have an understanding of tolerance of the population. Like some lake groups don't manage it because they just tolerate it when it's at certain levels. You've got these prevention aspects out there in terms of trying to stop other invasive species from coming in. And then you've got different active management techniques as well. So it might make sense to use herbicides in some scenarios, but hand harvesting in others, or mechanical harvesting, depending on your population at the time. So the idea of creating a management strategy for Eurasian water milfoil management might employ any and all of these different kind of components. Now, I picked a few of the tools in the toolbox, if you will, in terms of methods of which you can manage Eurasian water milfoil. The first most obvious one might be just manual removal, literally pulling this thing out by hand. And this technique can have the ability to manage the entire population if you have a very small population. Maybe it's a new site by your dock. There's 2 plants there. Yes, you can pull those out by hand. That's pretty straightforward. It fits well for low density occurrences if you're managing it on a population level. On the other hand, if you're doing nuisance control, maybe you've got a dense colony right near your property, hand harvesting in that scenario is going to have a little bit different use. You're going to be maybe creating a navigation lane through the bed of plants. Rather than trying to remove it all, you might be just trying to punch a 10-foot wide lane through the colony so that you can boat through it, for example. And that's a way that hand harvesting might fit a nuisance control. Pretty straightforward. In order to kill a plant with hand harvesting, you got to remove the root material, right? That's pretty easy to see. One technique that's available, a lot of contractors offer this service, and some lake groups also purchase their own units to employ this. Diver assisted suction harvest is the name of it. Essentially, it allows the diver to go in and harvest the milfoil plants and feed it into a suction hose, which then is transported up onto the vessel on the water surface, like a pontoon boat, let's say. So it's a little bit more efficient. The diver doesn't have to surface to drop off their plants. They can just keep pulling and putting them in the suction harvester as they go. That requires a DNR permit to do, and some level of planning, of course. There are scale limitations for any kind of hand harvesting strategy. A lot of times you can imagine how the size of an area gets to be limiting pretty quickly. If any of you own property and you know what like a half acre is like, or 1 acre is like, you start looking at that in terms of the lake, all of a sudden you're looking at 14 acres of milfoil in one area of the lake. Imagine trying to weed a 14-acre garden. It's going to take a lot of effort. Only now you're underwater, which makes it even more challenging. We really try to help folks understand what an expectation of using hand harvesting is. A lot of times you're just trying to reduce the population, especially when it's established. You're never really eliminating it completely on established scenarios. Some of the other limitations include when there's a lot of native plants in your way, or especially as the season progresses, more and more native species are up as the summer goes on, and they're possibly in your way for trying to get at the Eurasian. Water clarity can pose a challenge at times. Sediment type, if it's rocky bottom or sand, it'd be difficult to pull the roots completely out. And could be obstructions in your way, like if it's around a dock, for example. When trying to tie in the utility of a hand harvesting strategy based on the level of your Eurasian water milfoil population, we try to tie these together based on whether you have a low population, maybe it's not established, it's isolated occurrence, it could be a new introduction. And then on the kind of middle level here, now you've got a moderate population, it's expanding to form some colonized areas now. It might be rebounding from an herbicide treatment the year or two before, for example. And then on the high end, you've got, very dense established populations. And how would you apply hand harvesting techniques to these different population levels, either on a site-by-site basis or as a lake-wide population goal? On the low end, when you have a small amount of milfoil, you can attempt to locally eradicate it. Like I was describing earlier, if there's 3 plants by your dock, you can try to get all 3 of them out and eradicate it from that site. But as you progress into this kind of middle ground, now the realistic strategy that might fit when you have a moderate population is to try to reduce it a little bit, try to slow it down, try to inhibit it from causing nuisance growth later in the year, just suppressing its growth to some level. That's realistic. Eradication is no longer a realistic strategy at that level. And when you're in a high, very dense established population, really your only tool, your only outlook for hand harvesting in that scenario is to provide some seasonal suppression of those populations. Like if you're going to target a very dense colony that's, pretty sizable, a lot of effort of hand harvesting, you're probably just going to knock it down a little bit, and it's all going to be right back the next year, very likely. So that just kind of helps folks set expectations up front when they try to do like a hand harvesting strategy, for example. Another technique that's commonly employed is mechanical harvesting. As you see in the photo, an example of one of those large weed cutting machines. In this scenario, you're typically using that nuisance control strategy I was describing earlier, that perspective where you're just trying to maybe make it so you can swim there, so you can boat through the area. The mechanical harvester is going to cut the tops off the milfoil plants, and then they get, put on a conveyor belt and transported out of the lake. But it doesn't kill those plants. It's cutting them. You can think of it like you're mowing your lawn and bagging the clippings. It doesn't kill those plants. It's suitable sometimes for large, dense beds of milfoil. It can be applied in clear cuts, but more often what it's used for is creating lanes. An example might be if you've got a long stretch of milfoil kind of on a depth drop-off contour in your lake, and there's 10 docks that are impacted by this, you might punch 10 holes in it to get a lane through the main colony and 10 spots for folks to boat through, while not cutting the rest of that colony, for example. Now, this does create a lot of fragments, and it's something that people might be concerned about. And as I was talking about earlier with the types of fragments that are out there, these are going to be mechanical fragments. They're not going to have those adventitious roots, so they're not as viable as the fragments that the milfoil is already putting out on its own. So the concern for spread by using the technique of mechanical harvester is overstated. Now, there is risk of bycatch. Like it's obviously not selective. You can't pull it up and avoid the native species. It can also capture fish and amphibians and other critters that might be in the way. Now, herbicide treatment is another technique that's out there in the toolbox. And typically the goal when using herbicides is to achieve multi-year population control. So this might be treatment occurs, we don't find milfoil that season. Hopefully we don't find it the following year. But by the time you get to 2 years post, there's a likelihood that that's the longevity you're going to see with a treatment of this nature. To be an effective herbicide treatment, it has to meet concentration exposure times in order to kill the plants. That essentially means you need the herbicide on the target site long enough to kill the plant. And we have a good understanding on some of these herbicides out there as far as how long we actually need the herbicide to be on site in order to be effective to kill the plants rather than just injure them. And some of what we've learned indicates that small spot treatments are very, very difficult to achieve sufficient CETs to kill these plants. Essentially, if you don't have a 5-acre site, all we can get most of the time is injury to these plants and knock it back, but not killing the roots. And then the following year, you're kind of back where you were. Some of these spot treatments are more effective if you can have a broad area versus a narrow area. Protected areas are more effective. Think of a bay of the lake that's protected on 3 sides. This has been scaled up to whole lake and basin level concepts as well. It introduces a greater need for risk assessment discussion with the use of herbicides. We have a good idea of what impacts to different native species are out there in terms of the plant community. Your native milfoils are going to be a loser, for example. There are some known impacts to early life stages of some fish species, such as walleye, specifically with the herbicide 2,4-D. And this is bringing pause to a lot of regulators. And there's the unknown impacts as well. That's always something that's hard for a lot of groups to get past, is you don't know what you don't know. Here's one example of a spot treatment, a pretty typical progression. We see this was North Twin Lake up in Phelps in Vilas County. This is showing kind of the density of the milfoil here in the yellows and the grays. This is a 10-acre site. The black is where the herbicide was applied. The year of the treatment, there was no milfoil detected. The year after, now we're starting to see a few singles, not very much. 2 years post, we had substantial rebound within the site. And this is a pretty typical expectation of an herbicide spot treatment. You have a couple of years where there's not much there, but it's going to come back. There's no, keeping it out of there forever. My last slide too, in terms of herbicide use and the Manitowish chain specifically, right now it's important to understand that the department's policy is very conservative in terms of the use of herbicides in the northern part of the state, in the the ceded territory, including the Manitowish Waters area. Right now, in this year, there's no permits being issued if wild rice is potentially impacted. And we see on this map I'm showing, the green is where wild rice is in the Manitowish chain. This is from Glyphwick's website. This is just showing you that right here is that kind of core population in the Trout River that has wild rice in it. There's wild rice in the downstream Manitowish River as well. So knowing with this information right now, the department's policy will not permit herbicide use at this time. So I probably out of time, but I do have my contact information up there on email. And if there's any time for a question or two, that completes what I had prepared for slides.
It's going to be a virtual survey, but that's going to be a way for this planning team to get a feel for what our community supports and what the different stakeholders and the different kinds of stakeholders and how they feel about different management methods, treatment methods, and tolerable levels maybe for Eurasian watermilfoil, and how those different groups and users are using the water as well. After that is completed, we're also going to have a full lake point intercept survey, which is that quantitative analysis formed with a whole grid across the lake that Todd had mentioned. That's being done on Lake Manitowish this summer by Onterra as well. With the Eurasian watermilfoil being mapped across the Manitowish chain, we're also having Onterra help develop a tool using ArcGIS that'll be posted online for people to see updated data on where Eurasian watermilfoil is and what management strategies took place in what areas. So it'll be different layers where you can toggle and see from year to year how it's changed. Where have we dash harvested, maybe where we use chemical, where we haven't, where have divers assisted, and any other areas that we wanted highlighted on there as well. The goal is to have this plan final first draft completed and posted by the end of the summer, so that it has a public review period as well. So that's required by the Wisconsin DNR, and that'll be another opportunity for the public and stakeholders to give their opinions on what the final first draft says. There'll be a response to that as well, and then the final draft of the plan would then be submitted and completed in prior to the September 15th deadline of the pre-applications for grant funding for control funds for the Wisconsin DNR. That's important if we want to try to pursue funding from the DNR to pay for this project for the control efforts. Right now, these are all planning grants, and in order to have the control grants, that needs a plan in place. The control grants are up to $150,000 of funding for a 75-25 cost share. So it could be up to a little over $200,000 project. If that were to happen, then you can use that funding across multiple years as well, and up to 3 years. So that would be the goal for the end of the year. The next part that I'm going to cover is management actions and what we're actually doing right now in 2025, and what we have planned for the Manitowish chain. In the area that you saw in Todd's map, and we have these great maps on the wall over here, so if you haven't had a chance to look at them up close, feel free to linger after, and Greg and I are happy to answer questions. But in that lower Trout River section, which is Manitowish Lake to Alder Lake, that's where the dominant population of Eurasian watermilfoil is. Those polygons combined and all those points mapped about 14 acres by the end of 2024. It's a significant population in there. And if you recall Todd's information about trying to weed a 14-acre garden, in that area, what has to happen is we've come up with a priority list and a budget for what we'll spend on dash harvesting. Dash harvesting is that diver assisted suction harvest. So it's extra tools that hand pullers would use to be underwater longer, so you don't have to come up for air, and you can send your plants up the tube to the boat, so you don't have to unload your plants as well. That diver assisted suction harvest will be occurring in the Lower Trout River, and we've budgeted $100,000, which comes out to 37 days to contract Aquatic Plant Management Inc. to perform dash harvesting in that area. They'll prioritize the mouth of the river there into Manitowish Lake, so some of that funding will actually occur on some of those more dense points right outside in Manitowish Lake as well. But that has 37 days for them in a priority list moving down there. Then we have 18 days for Discovery Center. Our team right now performs snorkeling and free diving to remove plants. Usually our limit has been when you come across an area and it's just significantly too deep, which we haven't had on the Manitowish chain. It's some other lakes in the area, but you know, if it's up to 6 feet or so, that's still pretty applicable for snorkeling. But then if you just get too many plants, and if any of you have spent time snorkeling or free diving when you're out there, it's actually really hard work if you have to be going under and under for hours in a day. So that's where the diver assisted suction harvest becomes more applicable. But when you're surveying all these lakes, including like fawn and spider and stone, where we're finding Eurasian watermilfoil, those are very spread out populations. It also doesn't make sense to send out dash harvesters on the time that you're spending half surveying. So our team is looking in the water and surveying, patrolling the shoreline, doing meander surveys, and then when we find it, we're not only recording the data on it, the location, the size, but we also get in the water and pull it. So that's how we're managing everything outside of that Lower Trout River and Manitowish Lake zone. All of those are so far just points. None of them have become polygons or areas that big. So we have budget for 18 days for our team, and that hand pulling would occur across all the other EWM lakes, which are Spider, Little Star, the Upper Trout River, Fawn, Stone, and the Manitowish River, in that bay on the way to Rest Lake. We also are going to contract for APM, or have contracted with APM to do 2 days assisted in Spider Lake in that Southwest Bay. And going back to that was a great question on why is there more Eurasian watermilfoil in that bay. Why is a great question. You could come up with a lot of answers. Some of the most probable, I would say, is a lot of the Eurasian watermilfoil traffic coming out of under the bridge there. Boats are using that a lot, and when you hit the open water, just the way that lake is designed, usually the wind's coming around, and a lot of water is probably getting pushed into that bay. So maybe there's a lot more fragments that are making their way in there because of that. Additionally, while we've been surveying the Manitowish chain since maybe 2010 or so, I think, for curly leaf pondweed, annually, the entire chain, we haven't picked it up before, but maybe there's a lot of plants in that bay. Maybe it was there before 2024, and it just wasn't yet detected. In addition to that, the work that I just listed, the Discovery Center is building their own dash boat as well to add to our fleet, which will be primarily used on the Manitowish chain to assist in this. And so if we do then, or when that's in operation, hopefully this summer, we would use that possibly on the Spider, the Little Star, the Upper Trout, Fawn, Stone, and the Manitowish River areas, to better make our snorkeling surveys more efficient. Then for mapping and monitoring, the Discovery Center and Onterra are both helping with mapping and monitoring. The Discovery Center is going to be doing a full season AIS surveys across all of the lakes, except for that Lower Trout River in the Manitowish Lake. Those are both surveyed by Onterra late fall. In that Lower Trout River section, because we're not focusing on that early detection in that stage still, that'll be instead surveyed by Onterra after this 37 days of dash work occurs. So late season survey then, Onterra will be doing that on the Lower Trout River and on all known Eurasian Watermilfoil lakes. And the purpose for surveying again and again, our spring surveys are gonna help us, and we're gonna be pulling as we're surveying, and then we want Onterra to map everything at the end of the year, so we have a good basis for the next year, and to see it year to year consistently. We will also do late season surveys, our team, then on all of the non-Eurasian Watermilfoil lakes. So as of now, that's the Wild Rice, Alder, Island, Clear, Rest, and then Vance, Sturgeon, and Benson as well. And I think that concludes our work that we have scoped out for 2025 for management activities in the lakes and the plan that we have going forward. Would be happy to answer questions. Yes.
So is there, help me here, you know, when we should be monitoring our shorelines or whatever, is there a certain depth that you monitor up to 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet?
As deep as you can see plants.
Okay, but I mean, if you're in, can it grow in 20 feet of water and you don't see it until it gets to 5 feet from the surface? So
Usually in 20 feet of water, if you don't see it, it's because it's too turbid and the light and photosynthesis isn't happening at the bottom there. It can grow in 20 feet of water, if the light is reaching that deep. And for example, on the Trout River section or the Manitowish River section coming out of Stone Lake, when you're headed to Rest Lake, on the south side of the river there, the trees are cast over. It's very shady, and it's hard to see in the water there. The river is kind of extra turbid and it's dark. You don't ever get the sun on you. We were diving there, and you know, 6 or 7 feet of water, you couldn't see anything above water, but we found 1 or 2 kind of inland and shallower water, and we kept starting in and snorkeling back off underwater, and we were continuously finding plants. We probably picked up half a dozen plants in that area that you could not see at all from above water. And that's a really good point about, especially on Onterra's maps, because they're not doing the management, they're not in the water actually pulling afterwards. Every time you find just one plant, it's almost always more. Our team's maps on the just one plant may be more accurate because we get in the water and then we're recording as we're pulling. And if we are so far away from our boat that we're recording again, we'll drop another point. A lot of those points are single or few plants. So if you have like 3 or 4, that's still just a gray dot on the maps.
when you're pulling, what's the average length of the root? I mean, I would assume that there's no average length.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you want to get everything out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the roots on Eurasian Watermilfoil are actually kind of usually fibrous, and it depends on your bottom substrate as to how well that comes out. It's very variable. You know, like Little Star is very rocky, it's hard, those roots don't come out as well. Some areas where it's just very soft and soft sediment and mucky, you can actually get a lot of that root out a lot better. So
you don't get it all out.
And yeah, and you can trace them from like plant to plant, like they'll be all connected too. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
When it does its own fragmentation, is there a time of the year that's best, like, it'll drop most of their fragments in a certain time period, or is it all summer long?
It generally it is supposed to be just in a certain time period where they're the most reproductively viable. So those plants, it's midsummer when the water's the hottest. So it starts growing before it gets to the heat of the summer, and in that heat of the summer, the water is gonna then be warmer and they're gonna auto fragment better that way. That being said, they do fragment all season long, and depending on the age of a plant, more mature plants are more likely to fragment more often. Young plants, when it's just one strand and it might not even be split into 2 yet, you often don't see them fragment much at all. So our team, like when we're underwater, we're using potato sack bags. They're green and kind of like a mesh net. Sometimes we'll even on the big mature plants, and we know it's going to fragment. You can see all the little roots coming off all over the plant. Just take that whole plant like as a circle and drop it down over as you're snorkeling down, and then pull it in the bottom and shove it all in the bag. So it collects all those fragments as you go down in as well. Especially when you find just one in a lake just in one day, and you're like, it's so important here to make sure that you get all of those, because that's where you're really working towards the eradication of those areas of the lakes. You know, the Lower Trout River is now at a much different stage of management. Last question.
Yeah, given that the plant above the root is not very viable, according to him. What's the consensus and how it gets into the lake in the first place?
The plant
See-
above the root can be very viable, and it's though the most viable when they have all the roots hanging off of it.
I understand that, but if there's no roots on there,
Yeah,
so,
if there aren't roots on it, then it would be,
I mean, we say clean boats, clean water, whatever.
yeah.
Are the boats transferring, are waterfowl bringing in seeds? What,
No, likely not fowl and seeds. I would say it's the boats bringing in these plants, and that those plants are viable fragments that likely had the roots on them. Yeah. Thank you. I'm not sure who was next. Yeah, okay, last one.
If we all start hand pulling it in front of our docks and things, do you want us to report what we're finding, bring samples in? So
Good
that
question.
you can know.
Are you gonna cover that in volunteering later? Greg's gonna cover that later, so if he doesn't answer all of that question, we'll revisit it.
Okay.
All right. Are you next, Laura?
I don't know if I am or.
I think it's you. It's you. Yep.
Okay, hello, everyone. I'll make this quick. Say, I'm from the Lions Club and also work with the Alliance. And I don't think there's anybody that I've ever spoken to since we moved up here in 2005 that didn't come up here because of our chain of lakes. We love it. We have, a tremendous visitor group. And so as we were chatting in the Lions Club one day, and I believe Mike McKeon is on the Manitowish Lakes Association board, and he's also the president of the Lions Club. And he got with his board and chatted about this issue that we're facing and the need to build a war chest, to a grassroots kind of effort to make sure that money does not become an obstacle to the Discovery Center or the Lakes Association in executing whatever plan we need to help manage and control the proliferation of Eurasian watermilfoil across the chain. And so he said, let's form a committee called Save the Chain. Some of you may have already gotten some of our postcards. We sent 2 postcards out to every property owner on the chain, including Boulder Junction. And we threw out a target of raising $250,000. We won't need all of that this year. We don't know what we'll need this year, in addition to the money that is provided by the town. And that's already budgeted through the town budget and our taxes for the Discovery Center and the Lakes Association. But we don't want to have money be an obstacle this year, next year, or the year after. As you saw, this will be a journey. We'll always have Eurasian milfoil to some degree in our chain. We need to be careful. We don't want our docks unable to get through. We don't want to swim through, thick mats, and it becomes very thick. I don't know, Jamie, how thick can a mat of milfoil get before it just will kill itself because it's so dense?
It kills itself. It is surface matting and yeah.
But it can certainly stop a boat propeller when it gets too thick. So what we're doing with the Save the Chain campaign is trying to raise money. We have Sue and Eleanor here are the treasurers of this campaign. Sue, what do we have in the fund right now?
Right now, we're just a little above $113,000.
We have just over $113,000. We sent the first postcards out in December before Christmas, and then we sent another one out in January. My last big point, and if you'd like to donate, there's some cards up here. Oops, some cards up here that have the website to the Lakes Association. All the money that is donated will go to Eurasian Watermilfoil Management and Control explicitly, nothing else. And a really neat thing to celebrate, hopefully, that we get some good funding in and a good war chest, is we're having a free concert on July 5th at Kohler Park from 3 o'clock until 6. And the band is a very famous in the 70s and 80s band that they're still playing, called the Ides of March. And they are coming to play for us. The Lions Club is picking up that tab. We're hosting the concert, thanking people for the Save the Chain donations for this campaign. We'll have Scott Kirby as an opening act. The Ides of March will play probably 2 hours of that time, and they're willing to give autographs and pictures with the band members. They're very, very excited about this. We'll have our Lions tent there making hot dogs, hamburgers, selling beer and soda. Bring a lawn chair. We'll have shuttle buses from the town hall for parking over to Kohler Park, because we're expecting more than 1,000 people, we hope. This is gonna be big. You'll start to hear more, you'll see more in social media. It's gonna be fun, it'll be beautiful, and it's gonna make for an incredible 4th of July weekend as well. So that's the Save the Chain campaign. There's some rack cards up here, if you'd like to take it. I know everyone in this room loves our chain and loves the way it is with its pure waters and its glistening, good, healthy biology, good fishing and everything. And we just want to keep it that way. And it's tax deductible. So anyway, thank you. I think that's it for Save the Chain. If you have any other questions, we'll be putting out a lot more information. And there is good information on the Manitowish Waters Lakes Association website. The donations there's a way to donate online through the Lakes Association, and there's information up here at the counter. So any questions? Anybody know the song Vehicle? That's anyway, I'll say that. Okay, that's it for me. Is it done? Okay. Oh, take
So
it
I just
away,
have the
Jamie.
2 slides on
Thank you, everyone.
funding. So now I do have 2 slides to show you here, and it's about grant funding. I put them on slides because when I talk through it, it sounds very confusing, and all projects can kind of relate and blend together. And this got, well, it probably won't matter. Shifted just a hair. And if you go into presenter mode on that, okay, so we've grants are actually kind of the basis of like why the Discovery Center started its whole water program with the town. And the very first ones I think were 2010 era with curly leaf pondweed, and the DNR awarded the Discovery Center some grant funding. The town was paying the cost share for it, and we hired people to go out and do this management and monitoring work out on the Manitowish Chain Lakes. That actually was part of one of the first projects that kind of grew the whole woods and water program. And we work with a lot of towns in the area now, and with grant funding. So the grant funding for the Manitowish Chain recently has been focused on keeping that comprehensive management plan that was issued out back in 2019 up to date. However, planning grants can be used for other things like developing this new Eurasian Watermilfoil management plan. And there's control grants where you can get money then, like I said, to help with the control efforts. Grants are usually what the Wisconsin DNR surface water grants are either 66 or 75% cost share. So it really does maximize the dollars that are put into an effort. And it makes a great, stewardship effort of using money. In 2025, these grants were awarded for 2024 applications back in November, and they were announced in February. So there are 4 grants awarded to fund projects on the Manitowish Chain. The first 2, Manitowish Lake and Little Star Lake, are projects less related to Eurasian Watermilfoil and more related to ongoing updates that we should just keep doing to aquatic vegetation data to keep our plan up to date in its simplest terms. Those are capped at $10,000, which is, you'll see they were awarded for $10,000 each. The next line over is the share. That's that cost share that we or the partner has to pay. And then the total project cost is there on the right. So you take the award plus the cost share and you get the total project cost. So Manitowish and Little Star planning grants are pretty routine. The next 2, Eurasian Watermilfoil on the lower trout and Eurasian Watermilfoil fawn, stone, spider, and upper trout. these are pretty much one big project split in half to be able to get more funding, and you can do that when you have more than one lake. So all of the management planning activities that I listed earlier and some of the surveying activities for early season, late season surveys on Eurasian Watermilfoil are built into that funding. So the total funding that was awarded from the DNR thus far was $40,000 for this work. On the bottom there, you see 2025 early detection and response funding. So these have yet to be submitted. In part, I just need to write them, but the funding cycle's over and it won't award funding until June of this year. However, they can be backdated to costs already incurring, and they're a non-competitive grant. The ones on the top that I already listed were competitive grants. We competed for $6 million across, I forget how many applications throughout the state of Wisconsin. Thankfully and gratefully, we've been awarded 100% of the grants that we've been writing for the last 4 years at least at the Discovery Center. So we've been very successful in getting these grants for the town of Manitowish Waters. The bottom four there are a grant program that the DNR has that when you first detect an aquatic invasive species in a lake, if it's an early pioneering population, you can be awarded a grant of up to $25,000 of funding. I think it's a 6633, so it comes out to like a $33,000 project. And that funding can be used over the next few years. You can use it for management activities like polling, planning, surveying, lots of different things, all the different things that we have to do here. So we were awarded that for the Lower Trout River and Manitowish Lake already, and that funding was used last year for the management activities that occurred. Now, because fawn, stone, spider, little star all have Eurasian Watermilfoil, then we can now apply for all of those grants as well. And the work that actually occurred in 2024 for Spider Lake, because it occurred after that documented case of the first Eurasian Watermilfoil plant was found in Spider, which we documented, vouchered, and reported to the DNR, they'll actually back pay that on part of this grant project. So we now are able to apply for up to $100,000 of funding that we plan to here to help fund some of the other work that I was talking about. This work can be spread across multiple years. So in some of those lakes like Little Star that just had 2 plants, we won't be using that full $25,000 of funding in the first year. I believe you have up to 3 years technically to spend it, and then you can always ask for an extension, so it's usually up to 4 or 5. Does anyone have any questions about this slide and these grants specifically? Then I have one more slide after this. Yes.
So, generic question, what differentiates between lower trout and upper trout?
Alder Lake is in between, so we just come to call them that. Yep. So upper trout is wild rice to alder, and lower trout is alder to manfish. Any other questions? All right. More specifically, the Trout River only has one WIBIC code from the Wisconsin DNR. Because we actually didn't apply for a WIBIC under the Trout River, I believe we can apply for the Trout River WIBIC this year for that upper Trout River section and use it there. So there may be one more that we're able to apply for. Next slide. So last slide, not too many numbers here tonight, but this was a summary of projected Eurasian Watermilfoil costs in 2025. This comes from the 2 grant awards I talked about earlier on that last slide. And I've broken it down a couple ways because it's nice to know what's the state paying, what are we paying, and what's the total cost here. So the state is awarding that $10,000 and $10,000 thus far. I did not include the other ones because it gets a little soupy when we're not sure how much of that $25,000 we're going to use yet this year on some of those lakes. And that's okay. We're going to figure that out as we go. So there will potentially be more DNR award on this chunk of funding that gets spent this year. But at least the $20,000. The grants are on the left. I have that Manitowish grant on there, which I know I told you was just planning and it wasn't really Eurasian Watermilfoil, but because grants are very flexible and we're creative, we snuck in some surveys for Eurasian Watermilfoil in there because it's allowed, and we wanted to maximize it up to that $10,000 of funding. So there is actually about $3,000 of Eurasian Watermilfoil surveying in that other planning grant. And then the non-grant Eurasian Watermilfoil costs, in the simplest terms, is all the actual control efforts, the hand pulling and the dash harvesting, because the grants will not fund control efforts under planning grants. So that's where that 100,000, 37 days for aquatic plant management activities lives. And all of our hand pulling and that work as well. So that brings the total project cost for Eurasian Watermilfoil projected this year. It's all an estimate, right? Things change. To being about $165,000 that we're anticipating. Questions?
And Onterra is in those costs too?
Yep, Onterra's in there as well. Most of Onterra's work is getting funded through the grant fundings.
So I'm curious how,
Yes.
I mean, the Discovery Center is doing a lot
Mhm.
here. So do you have a staff that does all this, or do you have students that come in the summertime, and who does all this
Yeah.
surveying and diving and stuff like that?
That's a great question. So for those online, the question was, the Discovery Center, how do we have the capacity to do all this work for, all the projects we have going on? We do have myself and another full-time, woods and water, staff person that work year round. So we're not seasonal at all. So our sole job is to support the woods and water program. And then we hire anywhere from, it's usually been 4 or 5. This year we actually have 6 because we've just been growing seasonal staff. And that's part of what we call our professional development program at the Discovery Center. They live and work on site at the Discovery Center. We provide housing and they're both 3 and 6 month positions. So we have 2 6 months and 3 and 4 3 month positions coming up. Those staff have all been hired and are anticipated to start in May here. And those are the staff that come out and help us do a lot of the field work. These are either current college students or recent graduates that are doing the work with us. And being a really good swimmer is usually very high on the list of qualities that we're looking for. One more question, yeah?
Yeah, how much of the non-grant cost is coming from the town?
Yeah, great question. So the town has a budget this year of $100,000 for AIS in general. We've had a contract with the town of Manitowish Waters for supporting all these projects that we do because we don't just work on Eurasian Watermilfoil. We've been doing curly pondweed, purple loosestrife, monitoring for things we don't have like spiny water fleas, zebra mussels. We were monitoring for Eurasian Watermilfoil before we had it, and then monitoring all these lakes that don't have it yet. So in the past, that budget had been about $38,000 for a lot of years. Last year it was $65,000, and then this year the town upped that to $100,000. So this year is actually a very blended year between money coming from the town and the Save the Chain campaign. So the total amount funded for these projects, Eurasian Watermilfoil only, is that $165,000. So there is additional funding that's happening on the Manitowish Chain of Lakes. I don't know that number offhand. That is supporting the other aquatic invasives that we both do and don't have. Any other questions? Last
Are you
one?
gonna be doing your own suction collection?
Yeah, and maybe did I forget to, no, I think I mentioned that earlier, but we are building our own dashboat. Yeah, it's actually been an ongoing process with our insurance, and today we actually have a actual number and a contract to sign from our insurance, which is amazing. As you know, the Discovery Center, we're a camp, we have kids, we have property liability, we're a public facility. So it was a big thing for getting an insurance agent to add this activity that didn't really feel like it was in the scope of our overall operations. But we've overcome that hump now, and we are able and allowed and voted on our board to proceed with pursuing this dashboat. So there are some civic organizations that were willing to donate that and other donors in our community. It wouldn't be used just on the Chain of Lakes, but majority of it would be, but it could be used for curly pondweed and dash harvesting on other lakes as well. So also what's amazing about that is Aquatic Plant Management has been an awesome consultant. They are great to work with. They helped us build the whole budget for our dash boat. They've helped itemize all the different parts for this. They've found used parts from other boats that they told people to build that they didn't want anymore, and they're helping us put it together. So we have the best in the business in our region helping us build this boat too, which is amazing. All right, and so then lastly, we'll finish up with Greg. I think you're last here.
I think we can bring the lights back up. I mean,
I can turn on.
slides. Maybe kind of look like a black silhouette there.
Okay, we're just about nearing the end of the program, and I just want to take a few minutes to talk about being involved and getting involved. First of all, everybody in this room is involved. You're concerned, you came out tonight. You didn't do this because you couldn't think of something else to do on a Thursday night. So we appreciate you being here. We do need that involvement. You've probably read different articles and it's got information from different sites. On the bottom of your agenda is the website for the Lakes Association and the Discovery Center. There was a lot of information presented here tonight. There's different informations on those websites as well as links to other sources that go beyond the Discovery Center and the Lakes Association, different perspectives you can get from links going to the DNR. I would encourage you to search out as much information as you can. And I would very much encourage you to spread the word. Please tell your friends, please tell your neighbors, please tell the people who live down the shore from you what was discussed here tonight. This is a huge project. This isn't going to be easy and it's going to be long and ongoing. And we need as many people, we need a community very much involved in this process if we are to have some degree of success with it. So getting informed, spreading the word is very important. Laurel spoke very eloquently about the benefits of how much we would appreciate some financial contributions to the Save the Chain campaign. That is another way of being involved. And then there's the hands-on stuff. And we could spend about an hour up here talking about volunteering and monitoring, and it would be a great thing to do. I'm going to try and do it in just a couple minutes here, but we really do need people monitoring. Jamie and her crew are excellent. Onterra is excellent in the surveying they do, but we got 4,000 acres of water out there. They can't be out on every lake every day all the time. We need other eyes out there looking, and that's just a very, very critical need. The lakes, the weeds you see in June are not the same as the weeds you see in August. Things change. The gentleman spoke about finding some on Little Star, I believe that was, that we had not noted. It's important that we have people out there looking. We can't control it. We can't remove it if we don't know where it is. Last year, the Lakes Association had 4 aquatic invasive training sessions to identify plants. We're going to have a couple again this year. There's some information over here on this little poster here about those sessions. There will also be sessions on clean boats, clean water monitoring. The question was raised about how does the weeds get in here? Well, if we can juice up that program and have more people at the boat landings looking for the boats coming in and out, telling the fishermen, telling the day boaters, hey, it's really important that you get your weeds out, that you drain your live wells and other areas, your bilge tanks, that will be super important also. So please consider volunteering and monitoring. And one other way, we keep getting this question that kind of came up tonight, is can we pull that weed out of the water or not? Jamie talked about the interactive map that we'll have on the website. That will be a great resource just for information, but it'll also help people kind of decide what they should be doing when they're out there looking at weeds and finding something. That map should have, at the very least, a good representation of all the spots where we know Eurasian water milfoil is. So if you're out there and you're doing some monitoring or looking or fishing or whatever it is, and you see something, you go, hey, this is Eurasian water milfoil, what should I do? Well, there's kind of 3 scenarios. One, if you're confident in your skills and you say, yep, that's Eurasian water milfoil, you go check it out on the map and you say, yep, they know it's here. This is right in the area where they say that it is. Please go ahead and pull it. It'll be a little tough if it's in the deep water, but if you're able to get it out of there, feel free to pull it out. Scenario number 2, you're confident in your skills and you check that map and it's not someplace that we have noted that we know where it is. We need to know that. Jamie and her crew have to go out there and survey it. They have to record it. If it's in a lake that it's never been in before, there's a whole process so the DNR is aware of it and it'll feed into that whole grant process in the future. So we need to know that. You can take part of it off the plant, but don't remove the whole thing and submit that plant. And I'll tell you how in a second. The third scenario is if you're not so confident in your skills. It's a little tricky sometimes to tell the difference between Eurasian water milfoil and northern water milfoil. But if you're out there and you see a plant and you go, what should I do with this? I'm not sure. Take a sample off the plant. What you can then do with that sample is put it in a baggie with a little bit of water. We don't need 3 feet of plant. We just need a little bit. It doesn't have to be like a water balloon in the baggie either. And put some identifying information on that baggie. Put your name, some contact information for you, and the date that you found it, and if possible, about where it is. If you're comfortable with using your smartphone to take a GPS coordinate, that would be great. If not, 10 feet south of the big blue boathouse on the south shore of Lake X. We'll get back to you if you give us the contact information. You can take that baggie with that sample and take it to the Discovery Center between 10 and 5, Monday through Friday. And that fantastic team over there will take a look at those plants and get back to you and tell you what it is. So yes, if you're confident in your skills and it's on the map, please help us out, get it out of the water. If you're not quite so confident, let us know and we'll see what we need to do with it. Now, we'd like to open this up for some general questions at the end. I'll ask if anyone has any questions first. We can maybe take 1 or 2 questions on volunteering if anybody has any. Otherwise, we'll open it up just for some questions for about 5 minutes at the end.
Please repeat the questions for the people online.
I will do that. Thank you. Any questions on volunteering? Please take a moment to look at the information over here. And if you forget to look at it and you go, wish I had, it's all on the websites. All right, I'll stand up here. I guess maybe Jamie might want to come up here also. And Angie, you're our timekeeper. Keep us to about 5 minutes of questions or so. Or if it runs longer than that, we'll be hanging around and we'll answer the questions. But does anyone have any questions about anything that was brought up tonight? Wow, we did a great job. We answered all the questions. I don't believe that's the case. There's a lot of information out there. We're really thrilled that you came out. This is really important. And that we have an involved citizenry. Go spread the word.